Welcome to our YouTube channel, The Alien Tales, and please ensure that you have subscribed.
She mistook me for her mate. Now her species thinks we're bonded for life. It was a simple misunderstanding. Until her mother showed up with a wedding gift, and I realized no doesn't exist in her language. Zephyr Station's artificial gravity always made Eli Thorne slightly nauseated. 3 years working as a xenocultural liaison, and he still felt like a tourist. He adjusted his breathing apparatus and checked his datapad. 6 more interviews, then he could retreat to his quarters. Liaison Thorne, your next appointment. His assistant's voice crackled through the comm. Send them in. The door hissed open and Eli nearly dropped his datapad. A Lycidian female, no, not just any Lycidian, possibly the most striking one he'd ever encountered. 7 feet tall with opalescent skin that shifted between pale lavender and deep indigo depending on how the light hit it. Her arms moved in perfect synchrony as she ducked through the doorway. Her eyes, all 3 of them, were silver with flecks of emerald, and they widened upon seeing him. Varek? She breathed, her translator glitching on the unfamiliar word. Before Eli could respond, she crossed the room in 3 graceful strides and pressed her forehead against his. A mild electric shock passed between them, not painful but intensely intimate. I'm Eli Thorne, he stammered, stepping back. I think there's been Nyxeris thrall, she interrupted, her secondary arms lifting in what his cultural training identified as a gesture of reverence. I have found you across the vast darkness. Eli's skin tingled where they'd touched. Ms. Thrall, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, she said, her voice melodic despite the translator. The Asheran never errs. Your energy signature matches perfectly, right? The Asheran, a Lycidian biological response that supposedly identified their destined mate. Eli had read about it but never expected to become personally involved. I'm human, he explained gently. We don't have the same bonding processes. Nyxeris looked puzzled, her skin flushing deep violet. But you felt it, yes? The connection, had he? That strange electric sensation wasn't typical of human interaction, but surely it was just some physiological reaction. Let's start your interview, he said, avoiding the question. You're applying for cultural exchange residency? Yes, she replied, settling into the chair opposite him but maintaining intense eye contact. To learn human customs, and to be near you now that I've found you. Eli suppressed a groan. This was going to complicate his mission evaluation considerably. By the 3rd day since their meeting, Eli had received 17 messages from Nyxeris, each more poetically effusive than the last. His attempts to explain the mistake were met with what his translator interpreted as charming modesty. You've got to fix this, he told Karsadul, the station's xenobiologist. They sat in the mess hall, Eli hunched over his synthetic coffee. Karsa's 4 eyes blinked asymmetrically, her species equivalent of amusement. You're asking me how to reject an alien who's biologically convinced you're her soulmate? She snorted. That's not xenobiology, that's diplomatic suicide. Her residency application is excellent, Eli admitted. I can't reject it without cause, but if I approve it, she'll consider it acceptance of her courtship, Karsa finished. I've studied Lycidian pair bonding. It's fascinating, really. Their nervous systems literally synchronize on contact if they're compatible. That shock you felt? Her biochemistry was attempting to align with yours. Eli groaned. But I'm not Lycidian. Apparently close enough. Karsa tapped her datapad. Their mythos suggests the Asheran transcends species. There are accounts of Lycidians bonding with other sentients, though never humans before. Wonderful, Eli muttered. I'm making interspecies history. You could be flattered. Nyxeris is quite accomplished. Decorated military service, advanced engineering degrees. Not the point. I can't marry someone over a biological hiccup. Karsa's expression grew serious. In Lycidian culture, there's no concept of rejecting the Asheran. It would be like rejecting gravity. There must be some way to communicate this isn't happening. Here's the real problem, Karsa said. In their language, there's no word for no in matters of the Asheran. Their entire relationship structure assumes mutual recognition of the bond. Eli's datapad pinged. Another message from Nyxeris, this one containing what appeared to be a hand-composed poem comparing his eyes to distant nebulae. "I'm screwed, aren't I?" he asked. "Figuratively," Karsa replied. "Possibly literally if you don't figure this out. Lycidian mating rituals are enthusiastic." Eli's face burned. "That's not helping. Look, approve her application. It's the right thing professionally. Then we'll work on cross-cultural communication. Maybe she'll lose interest when she realizes how boring humans are." Eli nodded reluctantly and pressed his thumb to the approval section of Nyxeris's file. The datapad chimed cheerfully, utterly unaware it had just complicated his life exponentially. The chiming of Eli's door startled him awake. Blinking groggily, he checked the time 0300 station standard. Who could possibly? When he opened the door, he found himself facing not one but 3 Lycidians. Nyxeris stood in front, flanked by 2 older individuals whose skin bore the deeper purple hues of maturity. "My beloved," Nyxeris said warmly, "I bring my mother, matriarch Iltara, and my parent second, Zyvex." Eli blinked, suddenly very aware he was wearing only sleep shorts. "It's 3 in the morning." Nyxeris looked puzzled. "Is this not the customary hour for family introductions? Our research indicated human bonding rituals occur during rest cycles." "Absolutely not," Eli spluttered, but the damage was done. The matriarch had already glided past him into his quarters, all 4 of her arms carrying elaborately wrapped packages. "Young Thorn," Iltara said, her voice resonating at a deeper frequency than Nyxeris's. "You have awakened the Asheran in my daughter. This is cause for great celebration. Look, there's been a misunderstanding." "Your modesty is charming," Zyvex interrupted, setting down what appeared to be a large crystal orb, "but unnecessary. The union of houses is already recorded in the ancestral ledgers." Eli froze. "The what?" "When you approved my residency," Nyxeris explained softly, "it was transmitted to our homeworld as formal acceptance. Standard protocol for interspecies bonding. That was a work approval." Eli protested. Iltara's middle eye narrowed. "You signed with your genetic marker, did you not? In the presence of witnesses." His thumbprint on the official document. "Of course. Your domicile is modest," Zyvex noted, examining Eli's sparse quarters, "but adequate for initial bonding. We've brought the traditional gifts to enhance compatibility." Iltara unwrapped the largest package, revealing a pulsating, moss-covered rock. "The heartstone of your ancestors, to be placed at the center of your shared dwelling." "I don't have ancestors from your planet," Eli said weakly. "Of course not," Iltara replied indulgently. "We've provided them for you. The genealogists have already grafted your lineage into our house." Eli caught Nyxeris's gaze. Her eyes shimmered with joy, but beneath it, he detected uncertainty. She sensed his distress despite their cultural divide. "Perhaps," she suggested gently, "we should allow my bonded to absorb these developments. Human processing speeds are different." "Wise," Iltara conceded. "We shall return at the proper hour for the ceremonial feast." After they departed, Eli slumped against the wall, eyeing the pulsating rock now dominating his living space. "What exactly," he asked his empty room, "is the proper hour for a feast I never agreed to attend?" "You've got to talk to her," Karsa insisted the next day. "Actually talk, not just panic and flee." "I didn't flee," Eli protested. "I strategically relocated." "You hid in a maintenance shaft." For perspective, they stood in the botanical section, the one place Eli felt certain no Lycidians would venture, given their mild allergic reaction to earth ferns. "The heartstone is alive, by the way," Eli said miserably. "It hums at night. I think it's talking to my appliances." Karsa suppressed a laugh. "Look, I've been researching. The Asheran bond can be dissolved, but only through a ritual acknowledging mutual incompatibility." Eli brightened. "So there is a way out?" "Yes. But here's the catch, Nyxeris would have to agree that you're incompatible. After she's convinced the universe destined us for each other?" "Precisely," Eli groaned, sinking onto a bench. "I don't want to hurt her. That's the worst part. She's brilliant and kind. Just operating under a massive misapprehension. Maybe you need to understand her perspective better, Karsa suggested. Why not ask her to explain what the bond means to her, without imposing your human expectations? Later that day, Eli invited Nyxeris to the observation deck. They stood side by side, watching the gas giant the station orbited swirl its magnificent storms beneath them. I need to understand, Eli began carefully, what you feel when you think about our connection. Nyxeris's skin rippled with delicate patterns, a Lycidian expression of deep emotion. When I first saw you, it was like recognizing part of myself I'd never met. The Asherin isn't just attraction. It's confirmation that our life frequencies harmonize. But how can you be sure it's real? Not just some biochemical anomaly? She turned to him, her three eyes softening. In my culture, we don't separate biochemistry from truth. They are the same reality. She hesitated. But I sense your distress. This troubles me. On Earth, we choose our partners through time and mutual discovery. Is that not what we're doing now? She asked. Discovering each other? The genuine confusion in her voice struck him. To her, this wasn't coercion. It was the beginning of exploration, with the reassurance of biochemical compatibility already established. What if, Eli suggested, we pretend the Asherin never happened? Could we just get to know each other as friends? Nyxeris considered this, her secondary arms performing subtle calculations that her species used for processing complex emotions. I would like to understand your ways, she finally said. Though I cannot pretend the bond doesn't exist, I can respect that you experience it differently. It wasn't a solution, but it was a beginning. The ceremonial feast, as it turned out, had never been canceled. When Eli returned to his quarters that evening, he found his modest living space transformed. Floating orbs of soft light hovered near the ceiling. The furniture had been rearranged around the hearthstone, which now pulsed in time with ambient music from unseen speakers. Matriarch Iltara presided over a gathering of at least 15 Lycidians, all watching him expectantly as he entered. The bonded arrives, someone announced. The crowd parted, revealing an elaborate table laden with foods he didn't recognize. Eli, Nyxeris approached, wearing ceremonial attire that accentuated her height. I meant to warn you, but my mother insisted on tradition. What exactly is happening? He whispered. The Feast of Genetic Futures, she replied softly, where our families celebrate potential offspring. Eli choked. Offspring, merely theoretical at this stage, she assured him. Though the geneticists are quite excited about the possibilities. Before Eli could process this, Iltara swept him into the center of the gathering. Young Thorn, I've consulted with your superior, Administrator Valen. Eli's stomach dropped. You spoke to the station administrator? About us? Naturally. As your senior familial representative in this sector, her blessing was required. Iltara's tone was triumphant. She was most accommodating after I explained the diplomatic implications. Of course she was. A human Lycidian bonding would be unprecedented. A public relations goldmine for an administrator seeking promotion to the Central Worlds. Now, Iltara continued, we shall commence the tasting of potential. A younger Lycidian approached, bearing a tray of small crystal vials containing liquids of various colors. Each represents a possible genetic combination, Nyxeris explained gently. By tasting, we honor the theoretical children our union might produce. Eli's mind raced. This had gone far enough. Before we continue, he said loudly, I'd like to explain something important about human bonding traditions. The gathering quieted all eyes. A disconcerting total of 45 among the 15 guests, turning to him. On Earth, he began carefully, we have a practice called courtship that must precede any formal bonding. It's sacred to us and cannot be circumvented. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Iltara's middle eye narrowed suspiciously. This courtship, Eli continued, gaining confidence, requires a period of at least one standard orbital cycle before families can be involved. It's a time for the potential bonded to learn each other's ways. Alone, he emphasized the last word, meeting Iltara's gaze directly. Is this true? The matriarch demanded, turning to Nyxeris. To Eli's surprise, Nyxeris nodded firmly. I've studied human customs. What Eli says is accurate. We must honor his traditions as he honors ours. Over the next 2 weeks, Eli's life settled into a strange new rhythm. The Heartstone continued its mysterious communion with his appliances, occasionally causing his coffee maker to produce beverages that tasted suspiciously like Lycidian tea. But true to her word, Nyxeris had convinced her family to respect the human courtship period, giving them space to navigate their unusual situation. They began meeting daily in the station's arboretum, a neutral territory where neither felt disadvantaged. Today, Nyxeris arrived carrying what appeared to be a small, translucent cube. A gift, she explained, offering it to him. A human custom, I believe. Eli accepted it cautiously. Within the cube, tiny points of light shifted and danced. What is it? A memory fragment. From the first time I encountered your species' music. Her skin flushed a delicate shade of violet. It reminded me of you, even before we met. The gesture touched him unexpectedly. Thank you. That's incredibly thoughtful. They walked in companionable silence through the winding paths of Earth vegetation. The station's environmental systems simulated a gentle breeze. May I ask something potentially uncomfortable? Nyxeris finally said. Eli nodded, bracing himself. If the Asheran is unfamiliar to humans, how do you recognize your compatible mates? It was a reasonable question, one he should have anticipated. We don't have any biological certainty, he explained. We spend time together, share experiences, and feel things develop naturally. So you choose based on incomplete data? Her 3 eyes blinked asynchronously, a sign of deep confusion. How do you avoid catastrophic misalignments? Eli laughed softly. We don't, sometimes. That's why we have divorce. Dissolution of bonds? She appeared genuinely distressed. How can you bear the severance? It hurts, he acknowledged. But sometimes staying together hurts more. They reached the small pond at the Arboretum Center. Nyxeris knelt, her 4 arms moving in perfect coordination as she trailed her fingers through the water. In my culture, such uncertainty would be terrifying, she admitted. The Asheran gives us security, but does it give you choice? She considered this. Choice exists in how we nurture the bond, not whether to accept it. She looked up at him. Does your way truly bring happiness? Not always, Eli admitted, but the freedom to choose our path matters to us. Perhaps, Nyxeris suggested tentatively, there is wisdom in both approaches. Security and freedom need not be opposed. Looking at her, illuminated by the Arboretum's artificial sunlight, Eli felt something unexpected. Not the electric shock of their first meeting, but a quieter, warmer sensation. The beginnings of genuine connection. Diplomatic crisis wasn't how Eli had planned to start his day, but Administrator Valen's urgent summons left no room for misinterpretation. The Lycidian High Council has filed a formal complaint, she said the moment Eli entered her office. Something about you violating sacred bonding protocols? Eli sank into the chair opposite her desk. That's impossible. I've been excruciatingly careful. Valen tapped her console, bringing up a holographic document. According to this, you missed an essential ritual timing. She squinted at the unfamiliar term. The confluence of symmetry? Apparently, it can only occur during a specific astronomical alignment. Eli's confusion must have been evident because Valen sighed heavily. Look, Thorn, I initially supported this situation for its diplomatic potential. A human Lycidian bonding could open unprecedented channels of cooperation. I never asked for this, Eli protested. Nevertheless, you're in it. And now, the Lycidian ambassador is threatening to withdraw their mining concessions if this isn't resolved. Her expression hardened. Fix it. As Eli left the administrator's office, his datapad chimed with an incoming call. Nyxeris's face appeared, her skin an ashen gray, a Lycidian sign of extreme distress. Eli, we must speak urgently, she said, her usual melodic tones flattened. Can you come to the observatory immediately? He found her standing alone before the vast viewport, her silhouette stark against the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. All 4 of her arms were wrapped around herself in a defensive posture, he'd never seen her use before. "My mother has involved the council," she said without preamble. "She claims you're intentionally sabotaging the bond by missing the confluence." "I didn't even know about it," Eli replied. "Nyxeris, this has gone too far. People's livelihoods are at stake now." "I know." Her voice was small. "The confluence was tonight. She expected us to perform the ritual that would connect our neural pathways permanently." The implications hit Eli like a physical blow. Permanently? As in, a partial mind meld. It allows bonded pairs to sense each other's emotional states across any distance. She turned to face him. "I never told you because I knew it would frighten you." "You're right about that," he admitted. "Nyxeris, I care about you. These past weeks have been surprising. But this isn't fair to either of us. There's something else." Her three eyes wouldn't meet his. "If the bond isn't formalized tonight, the biochemical process that began when we met will start to deteriorate. Isn't that good? The misunderstanding will resolve itself naturally." Her skin paled further. "For my species, such deterioration is extremely painful, sometimes fatal." Eli stared at her, horror washing over him. "Are you saying if I don't go through with this ritual, you might die?" "I didn't want you to know," she whispered. "I hoped our connection might grow naturally, as it does for humans." "There must be another option," Eli insisted, pacing the small confines of Karsa's laboratory. "Some medical intervention?" The xenobiologist shook her head grimly. "Lycidian physiology is uniquely sensitive to the Asheran process. Once initiated, it follows a predetermined course." She pulled up a holographic display of neural patterns. "These are Nyxeris's readings from her last medical scan. The bond markers have already integrated deeply into her central nervous system." "This is insane," Eli muttered. "How can evolutionary biology be this cruel?" "It wasn't cruel in their evolutionary context," Karsa explained. "The bond was always mutual. Your situation is unprecedented." Eli slumped into a chair. "So my choices are permanent neural bond with someone I barely know, or watch her suffer, possibly die. There might be a third option." Karsa hesitated. "It's theoretical, but what if we could redirect the bond?" "What do you mean?" "The confluence ritual involves a specific energy exchange. If we could simulate that energy through technological means, we might be able to satisfy the biological imperative without creating a permanent link." Hope flickered briefly before Eli's pragmatism reasserted itself. "Would that even work?" "Unknown," Karsa admitted, "but worth attempting, given the alternatives." 3 hours later, Eli stood in the observatory alongside Nyxeris. The gas giant's largest moons had aligned, the astronomical event that triggered the confluence. The room had been cleared of others, leaving them alone with Karsa and her hastily assembled equipment. "Are you certain?" Nyxeris asked, her voice weak. The deterioration had already begun. Her usually vibrant skin had dulled to a muted gray. "If this fails, I won't let that happen," Eli promised, trying to project more confidence than he felt. "But a forced bond isn't right for either of us." Karsa attached delicate sensors to both their temples. The device will attempt to mimic the neural signature of a completed bond while preventing actual connection. Theoretically, Nyxeris's biology will be satisfied without establishing a permanent link. "And if it doesn't work?" Eli asked quietly. "Then we proceed with the traditional ritual immediately," Karsa replied. "There won't be time for alternatives." As the moons reached perfect alignment, Karsa activated her device. A soft humming filled the room, and Eli felt a tingling sensation spreading from the sensor at his temple. Across from him, Nyxeris gasped, her eyes widening. "I feel something," she whispered. For a breathless moment, it seemed to be working. Then, without warning, all three of Nyxeris's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed. Eli lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor. "Karsa!" he shouted. "What's happening?" The xenobiologist frantically checked her readings. "Her system is rejecting the artificial signal. We need to terminate." "No," Nyxeris interrupted weakly, her eyes fluttering open. "Not artificial. Real bond. Please." Eli looked down at her fading form, decision crystallizing with terrible clarity. "Turn it off," he told Karsa. "We do this the traditional way." The ritual was simpler than Eli had imagined. No elaborate ceremonies or cryptic incantations, just two beings, forehead to forehead, in the precise moment when three moons align to create a specific gravitational resonance. "Are you sure?" Nyxeris whispered, already positioned before him. Her skin had begun to regain some color at the prospect of completing the bond. "I'm sure I don't want you to die," Eli replied honestly. "The rest we'll figure out. Once done, this cannot be undone," she warned. "Our minds will always carry echoes of each other." Eli took a deep breath. "I understand." As the final moon slid into position, Eli leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Not just the electric tingle he'd felt during their first meeting, but a rushing torrent of sensation. Colors he'd never seen before bloomed behind his eyelids. Sounds beyond human hearing range whispered at the edges of perception. And then came the emotions, not his own, but Nyxeris's. Her initial joy at finding him, her confusion at his resistance, her guilt upon learning of the potential consequences, her willingness to suffer rather than force his compliance. And beneath it all, a growing genuine affection that had nothing to do with biological imperatives. He wondered what she was experiencing from his side. His fear, his reluctance, his growing care for her despite everything. The connection peaked in intensity, then settled into something quieter but no less profound. A background awareness, like knowing the location of your own hand without looking at it. When they finally separated, Eli found himself steadier than expected. Nyxeris's color had returned completely, her skin now pulsing with vibrant patterns of blue and purple. "Are you okay?" he asked, though he could already sense her well-being through their new connection. "Yes," she replied equally redundantly. They both knew exactly how the other felt. Karsa, who had respectfully retreated to the corner during the ritual, approached cautiously. "Readings are stabilizing for both of you. How do you feel, Eli?" "Different," he said truthfully, "but not diminished. It's like gaining an extra sense I never knew I was missing. The initial intensity will fade," Nyxeris explained. "In time, you'll be able to control how much you share across the bond. So I won't always know your every thought?" She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. "No, that would drive anyone mad, regardless of species. The bond connects emotional states, not specific thoughts." Eli nodded, relieved. "So what happens now?" "Now," she said softly, "we begin the true courtship, human style if you prefer." 6 months later, Eli stood at the same observation deck where he and Nyxeris had once discussed the nature of choice. The station rotated slowly, bringing the nearby asteroid belt into view, the future site of the first joint human Lycidian research facility. "Nervous?" Nyxeris asked, joining him at the viewport. Through their bond, he sensed her own anticipation mingled with pride. "A little," he admitted. "Co-directing an interspecies scientific initiative is slightly beyond my original job description." She laughed, the sound still as musical to him as the first time he'd heard it. "You adapt remarkably well for someone who once hid in maintenance shafts. You're never going to let me forget that, are you?" "Never," she agreed cheerfully. Through the bond, he felt her affection wrap around the teasing like a warm blanket. Administrator Valen had been thrilled with the diplomatic opportunities their situation created. Once the initial crisis passed, the Lycidian Council had proposed an unprecedented scientific partnership. Who better to lead it than the galaxy's first recognized human Lycidian bonded pair? "My mother arrives tomorrow," Nyxeris said, her secondary arms performing subtle calculations, something she did when slightly nervous. "She's bringing more ancestral artifacts for our quarters." Eli groaned good-naturedly. "The Heartstone has finally stopped reprogramming my coffee maker. I'm not sure I'm ready for more helpful additions." "She means well, I know." And he did know, not just intellectually but emotionally, through the bond they shared. The connection had evolved over the months, becoming less intrusive but no less profound. They had privacy when needed, but the underlying awareness remained, a constant reminder that neither was truly alone. Across the bond, he felt Nyxeris's thoughts turn wistful. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. The confluence? It was a question she rarely voiced, though he occasionally sensed her wondering. He considered his answer carefully. I regret the circumstances, he said finally. The crisis, the ultimatum, but the outcome. He turned to face her, taking both her primary hands in his. Never. What had begun as a misunderstanding had transformed into something neither culture fully had words for. Not quite an Earth marriage, not exactly a Lycidian bond, but something uniquely their own. A bridge between worlds. The research team from Earth arrives next week, he noted, changing the subject. We should prepare orientation materials for the cultural differences. Nyxeris smiled, all three eyes crinkling at the corners in the expression he'd grown to cherish. Who better qualified to explain cross-species understanding than us? As they stood together watching the stars, Eli reflected that some misunderstandings, despite all odds, led precisely where you were meant to be.